Welcome to another episode of Building a Leadership Mindset podcast. I'm your host, Nikki C., all the way from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, here with another amazing interview, an amazing guest that I met in Tampa. Super excited to bring him on. First, we want to definitely shout out our sponsors. Thank you so much, Jose Escobar with the Connected Leaders Academy, Patrick Rude with the Dirty Little Secret Society, Julia No with Breathe Capital Planning. I just absolutely adore you all. Thank you so much for your continued support in Building a Leadership Mindset podcast as we bring entrepreneurs, their stories, their struggles, and their triumphs in their journey of just blessing their communities and their members and their clients with just some amazing tools to just really take on this entrepreneurial journey, as well as so many other topics that we talk about here at Bomb Global. If you want to know what we have going on, you definitely want to check out our website at www.buildingaleadershipmindset.com. All right, without further ado, we have Dr. Brian B.K. Kent. He is a global leader, a senior consultant focusing on international and domestic operations. He advises businesses in the areas of business process, technology transfer, real estate, and investing. He has been an entrepreneur of the year twice in North Carolina and on the Inc. magazine 5,000 list 2 times. Without further ado, let's get our new friend here, Brian Kent. How are you today?
Well, good morning. It's great to be here. How you doing, Nikki?
I am well. I am well. Kent, thank you so much for Brian, thank you so much for joining us today. And I met you in Tampa. You just published your book. Tell us a little bit about that. What's the name of the book? And then we'll go into some background.
Absolutely. Yeah, we met in Tampa. We were doing a book release with about 7 other authors, and the name of the book is The R Factor. Matter of fact, I think right after we saw you, or right before we saw you, it actually made the international bestseller in the areas of business planning for Canada, Australia, and the U.S. on Amazon. So we're very excited about that. We're getting out to a few other locations, trying to hit at least one city a month. We'll be actually in Phoenix, I think in 2 weeks. We were just in DC. And then last week I was in Orlando, Florida.
Beautiful, beautiful. Great things happening. We'll get right into a little bit of what that book is about and what was the journey behind it, right? The path to finally get it out. So, can you share a little bit about your background and how your journey has shaped your leadership mindset?
Absolutely. So I grew up on a small farm in North Florida where you don't have the tools, so you have to use common sense so you don't get hurt. Joined the military, did 20 years in the military. Uh, my last couple of years was actually a government buyer of new technology, which is what spawned on my interest in finishing my PhD. So I could actually do the research and understand how new tech and emerging tech was actually being built and being fielded and delivered to both the economy and to the government. Retired from the service, opened up my second business. I think I've had about 6 or 8 of them now between buying and selling them. And so, as a serial entrepreneur, continued to use the knowledge of growing businesses processes, and the things like that to build strong businesses. And as I sold once, actually ended up in a Fortune 100 company and ran their global, one of their global divisions, which really taught me a lot more about how the business ran, how publicly traded companies look at business completely different than small and emerging companies or mid-sized companies do. So from basically the farm life to Fortune 100, I've actually did a couple of years in each category. So I bring that experience in the R Factor, and it's a compilation of about 15 or 20 years of experience to talk about how to scale your business through relationship management.
Great stuff. Great stuff. And what gave you that desire to even want to start your own business? Like, what was the it factor for you?
Well, first, I always had a little bit of an entrepreneurial background. I enjoyed business, even in the military, where I was afforded opportunities to do business type operations as well as strategic planning. So I used that time to kind of hone my skills. I finished my bachelor's degree, finished an MBA, and as it was time to exit, there was an opportunity for me to open up my first business, K3 Enterprises, which I am still the co-founder for. But it allowed me to open that and really start looking at how to look at emerging technologies, how to work with angel funds, how to work with VCs, and talk about how to actually build and scale companies. So it was really just a feeling of being an entrepreneur, and also too seeing things bud and grow. You
Mm,
know,
awesome, awesome. So, what were some challenges that was in that and currently in that industry when you started that you felt like you can lead the way in that?
well, a couple things. One, if you're selling to the government, you almost need a translator. I even called myself a translator for a couple of years. We're a small company, they have a great product, but they have no idea how to take it to market or how to scale. If you're reaching out for a commercial scaling, that's a little bit different, which is a different lexicon you have to follow, but there's still verbiage you have to use for investors and for sales to grow your company. If you're going to sell to the federal government, it's a different type of translator. They use language and verbiage that most companies don't understand. They don't understand the federal government contracting system. So therefore, you have to actually focus on what that translation and interpretation looks like so that you can build a strategic plan. Because most companies think, okay, I've got my product or I've got my process ready. I'm ready to go sell, but they haven't actually got the money in place to scale. They don't have the product tested to meet the requirements that will need to be, especially for the government or commercial market. For in the commercial market, there's a lot of safety requirements so that you don't have to get sued or you don't do something wrong to opens you up for a lawsuit. Same for the government. There's safety pieces, there's contractual pieces, there's testing pieces that all have to be completed in a sequential or in a peripheral order so that you can take your product to market.
Awesome. All great stuff. All great stuff. So, how do you personally define leadership and what does it mean to you?
Mm. I think leadership is really being part of I call it being a servant leader. It's how do you have people trust you enough to follow you? If they don't, then really who are you leading? Because every step or every decision you make is going to be always questioned, and there's always going to be that thought in the person that's following you or has been assigned to follow you's mind that maybe this ain't the leader I want to be with. In corporate America, you see that in turnover with employees if they don't trust their leader. In the military, you see them in reassignments. You see that as things are slow rolled or staffed to death, where it just doesn't happen until the leader is out of the way. Because even in corporate America, as in the military or the government, people leaders rotate every 2 to 3 years. And if a person that just doesn't trust you can staff you or just drag out the process to where the things you want to accomplish may not be accomplished as quickly or to the scale that you would like to as the leader.
Wow. Great stuff. Well, tell us a little bit about when entering into this spaces, like what was your biggest moment where you were like, all right, I got this client from point A to point B, exactly what they were looking for. And how did that make you feel as a leader?
Well, as a leader in the companies that I've actually ran, the key thing was meeting their goals every quarter or every year. As a private company, you're not held as to the 90-day standard that public companies are. So having been in a public company or publicly traded company, we had to make sure we hit our metrics every quarter or it would affect the stock price. With private companies, it was more about what was our mission, what was our mindset. So therefore, the leaders are in those things can actually look past 90 days and how do we look at stuff long term, or how do we look at stuff in a year, 18 months, or 2 years, and maybe the cycles don't match. And I, as I do consulting work, I tell people to look at who's buying your service or your product and what does their calendar look like. Because in the federal government, most of the money is spent in what we'll call the third quarter for the commercial or the calendar year. So therefore, your goals will be larger in the second and third quarter than they would be in the fourth quarter of the calendar year. In the fourth quarter of the calendar year, the buying at the federal level is the smallest quarter. Most of that's due to the way the budget's approved. In Fortune 100 companies or large companies, they have a budget and a fiscal year budget they follow also. So you have to look at who's buying from you, and then look at how you're going to shape your sales cycle to that buyer. And if you have multiple different customers or multiple different markets, you still need to look at that. One of the things I see as a failure when companies set their SMART goals, realistic as they are, they have not looked at how to tie those goals to the calendar or the fiscal years of their clients. So therefore, their salespeople are disgruntled because they just can't make their numbers the way the company's trying to measure the task.
Great, great, great. And this is for what industries? This is for all businesses,
So
corporations, small business.
the R factor is written for executives, managers, and entrepreneurs. And I tell them it's the relationship with your people you need to understand to help you set these goals. Because if your people understand the goals and know they're realistic and representative of how they can be successful, it makes it very easy for leaders to hold your subordinates accountable, or even your leadership accountable if you're mid-level management, because now we're all talking about the same solution in a timely manner, so that we can get to a successful goal. If the goal is unrealistic, it's not timely, and it's not pretty straightforward, the whole system gets frustrated. People miss their deadlines, they miss their revenue goals, then people don't get their bonuses, they get frustrated, they move to another company. So that relationship is very important as a leader, to understand how to make sure your people that are following you are synchronized with where the company wants to go.
And what data should you have before setting your goals? What if it's for a new company just starting? What data do you actually pull to even reach those numbers?
That's a very good question. Now that question, I do think, Nikki, is by your market or by your product. Obviously, somebody selling gasoline or gas stations is going to look at something different if you're selling Coke products or Pepsi products. So I think on that piece, you have to look at the demographic. You have to look at who the buyers will be or can be, because everybody doesn't buy your product. And other things I have also said is, who can you build a relationship as a buyer? Because if people don't like you, when they see you coming, they're going to try to find a way to miss the meeting, or they're going to try to find a way to avoid you to where they can't talk about buying from you. So that's where, as I talk about back into the R factor, I talk about the 360 degree relationship in the company with all the departments, and the relationship to your vendors and to your customers. So in this case, the research that your business development team needs to do, or your operational team needs to do, is, what are my buyers, or who are the potential buyers? And as a manager, nothing kind of irritates me more than somebody says, well, the automobile industry is a $8 billion industry, so we're going to go capture part of the automobile industry. Well, we need to figure out what part of the automobile industry we can really affect. Just because there's $8 billion, that number's a number I pulled out of thin air, but it's an example. We need to figure out where in the auto industry we actually fit, because we might find out we don't fit at all. I had a great company that had made a air filter that would the amount of air that it could clean per hour was just a massive number of cubic feet. And they approached the Navy and said, hey, we want to put this in submarines. And of course, the guy that works on submarines says, that's great. If you can make that system work like that and cut it down to about 1/6 that size, we can have a discussion.
Mm.
So they had a great product, but they were trying to sell it to somebody that could not use it in their current form factor. And I see a lot of businesses trying to shove their product into a market they can't take it, or they don't want to listen to their customer, which is another thing I see pretty regularly. Before you finalize your product, let's make sure the customer can use it. You know, the beautiful thing about the iPhone and them rolling one out every 6 months, or at least it feels like there's one every 6 months, is all they're doing is enhancing the base product they already know the customer wants, or, you know, like a better camera or a better software. But people have bought into the form factor and the use. So that's not a product where you're trying to change out a whole new market. Whereas in this situation with this air filter, they were trying to displace the current air filter, but yet they wouldn't fit in the submarine because it was too big.
Wow. So when building a product, you should also think about where it's going to fit, the end in mind, right? We should also be thinking about that as well when we are innovating, and all that good stuff. Great, great stuff. The last question I'll ask before we go into a break and then we'll come back is, how do you continue to learn and stay ahead of your leadership journey?
Oh, wow. I tell everybody I talk to, mentor, or work with that education is lifelong learning. I do something every year, whether it's a technical trade, a trade show, a college executive course, Harvard, Wharton, Stanford. I mean, pick an executive course, some of the the other universities. I just picked those three because those have pretty robust executive programs. But yeah, look at executive leadership training. Another thing that one of the things I try to do is I've really picked up the amount of time of stuff I'm reading.
Mm.
Things that you're interested in or things that you need to learn about, pick up the books and read them. A lot of people have already learned the hard lesson, and there's no reason to have to relearn that and to have that pain if you can read about it. They say, what is it? Most successful CEOs read, 50 books, 45 to 50 books a year, some number like that. And the average worker reads 2. So therefore, I'd say if you want to get into leadership roles, obviously increase your reading, increase your education. I'm not saying to go sit down and get a 4-year degree, because there's a lot of education in the tech trades. Matter of fact, I think half the universities should go to tech trades, because we need more tech trade out there, because now an HVAC or plumbing is no longer just some PVC pipe being glued together. And now that it has electronic boxes, it has timers, it has all of these things, flow filters, where now it's that a plumber now is a true technician. An HVAC person he's a true technician. He's on the network. I mean, they're doing remote login to your air conditioning units to fix it. So there's a lot more there than what used to be in a tech trade, and they're becoming very IT focused. So it's not just a simple go out and turn the wrench anymore. You have to understand all that. And now with all the regulatory issues too, with the EPA for both wastewater and plumbing and HVACs, there's regulatory things that you need to learn. I mean, I think somebody was telling me the other day, to pass, and this is a very rudimentary discussion, but it's to get certified to spray for mosquitoes.
Mm-hmm.
There were 82 different mosquito types.
Mm.
So you would have to know from your sample collection in a city or a county what type of mosquitoes you had, so that you could mix the fog or the mosquito repellent the city's putting out to make sure it was treating the mosquitoes that you had and you were not hurting the environment. So think about a technician. You don't think about the guy driving a mosquito truck having to have a certification where he had to study 82 different versions of mosquitoes.
Right. Oh my goodness. And then so we get all this knowledge, right? And we don't really know what we have in our hands. And people that look for our services, they don't realize what we had to go through to get there, to be able to serve at the capacities that these business owners can serve with a servant heart, and that
Absolutely.
leadership. Because you can provide a service or a product, but does it mean that you're the greatest or the best? And there's many out there, but if you come with a genuine heart, you are going to meet your client's needs. So great stuff, great information. Didn't think we were going to talk about mosquitoes, but wow, 82 different mosquitoes. How many certifications or courses or classes that you have to go through for like people pleasing, for different things like that, AI training, all this good stuff. Thank you so much for sharing. We're going to take a quick break, listen to our sponsors, and we'll be right back with Brett Cat. 1 second. Hello, hello. We are back with Brian Kent. He is the global leader in senior consulting, and he was talking to us about the Art Factor, which is his new book. First, before we go into that, because I knew that this was a long time coming, when you were asked that you should finally get a book, what were you doing before when you were consulting?
So actually, I still consult. I work with small and mid-sized businesses to actually develop a strategy to scale. Tell most of them this isn't. It's not a silver bullet. It's not a 30-day wonder. Businesses have to lay out a plan, to lay out a process. And what I've done in the R Factor is talk about, okay, do we have the right people? You know, it's kind of a little joke we came up with when we did it, but do you have the right butt in the right seat, right? So it's that piece, and then how do you do your business development, and how do you do your operations? How do you do your finance? And we talk about how to scale these companies to get them ready for business, because some of them have a product or a concept for a service. They've made it through the first year. Very few times do I actually have clients that are under a year old. Most of that's because a lot of those companies that are really emerging or really startup, they're still trying to figure out how to actually get the three legs of the stool, like the E-Myth says. You know, are they the entrepreneur, the manager, or the technician? And they're trying to figure out what the base of their company looks like. So once I get invited to come in, sometimes it's turnaround. I have been invited to help with turnarounds. Actually, I've worked as a fractional CFO and CEO to help in turnarounds. So I'm not afraid of hard tasks like that. But the key thing is really on to provide good sounding board support as a consultant to an executive or a manager where they can make decisions. Because one of the things I tell them too is when you bring me in, I'm going to tell you to make a decision, because lack of a decision is the decision, only you delegated it to somebody else to make. So decision making is crucial for anybody that we work with.
Wow, that is definitely a writer's on. I'm gonna have to go back, rewatch that, take that down real quick. That is just the simplest form of using what is available and knowing, right, the clarity of that. So usually your ideal client is usually already in business. They have a little bit more of that clarity. Now they just need to know the direction. And how do those phases look in that journey?
So most of the time, uh, I like to meet with if it's a small or mid-sized company, I like to meet with the owner, because if the owner doesn't have buy-in, I've found it to be futile. Um, because the people will want the change, but the owner will not want to invest in the change or will not want to make the change based on whatever the reason is. I've just found that. It's a beautiful thing about being a consultant. After 6 months or 90 days, if you don't really see any of the implementation, you can bow out gracefully and say, hey, this is just not a fit. So that's why I like to meet with the leadership and the owners first. Then the next thing, I, I treat the company as a holistic piece. A lot of times managers and executives, they still treat their companies in silos. Well, the challenge and problem you have with that is you can't, it's kind of like your car. You can't go change the tires and not expect it to not affect other parts of the car, because it's going to change the way your car drives. It's going to change the way your car uses gas. There's a whole lot, a very simplistic example, but your business is the same way. If you tune up the business development and they're successful, can you scale now the operations? Do you have the right people in operations for the change? Or we go out and we're successful in our business development or our sales. Has the finance department been notified, or they're tracking what we're doing, which could have a blip to where now do we have the success and now we're broke and we can't, and we're too late to go borrow the money for the deal. So I'll look at it. So phase one with the executive owner or the manager. Phase two is looking at holistically. I try to understand almost in an ISO approach or an ISO 9000 approach. What are your procedures to make sure crosstalk happens across the company? I don't dig into all the processes and those things until we really refine. Because really, what we're trying to do when I come in is I want to work with the executive team and the managers and the leadership and the entrepreneur to set those 1, 3, and 5 year goals. I don't really look at 5 years too much, even though we make somebody okay, because that's really, are we going to build this to sell, or is this going to be you're going to work it for 20 years?
Mm.
Really important is that 1 to 3 years, because that's where we have to talk about what you want this company to look like, how you want this company to function. Which then, once we kind of have that strategy in place, then I go back to everybody has an org chart. Some companies don't. I call it a functional org chart. Okay, so now that we know where we want to go, what are the functions and the micro functions we have to have? Because one of the things we also need to do is, once we understand that, is now how do we build the functional org chart, which allows me to then build a very good crosswalk on what I want each one of those positions to do. And then I can go take the skills of every one of the employees I have and see where there's deltas. And then as a owner or a manager, okay, now all of a sudden Susie or Joe may not fit the position on where the company wants to go. So is it a retraining effort, or do we, in this case, I call them apostles? He doesn't want to retrain. Do we help him find a job somewhere else? And the reason I call them apostles, a lot of times I see companies reorganize, redo their strategy, and then pink slips flow.
Mm.
Notice on a Friday. I've found that if you work with your employees and try to avoid that pink slip, they're going to come. Changes in the economy, changes in the business, changes in the strategy, things are going to change. So I say make them apostles. Help them find that job. Hopefully not with your competitor, but help them find that job. So therefore, when something comes up at that new location, they're going to say, "Oh, my other company with Brian, we used to do that. We were really good at it. Let me call them and see if they still do that." And now all of a sudden they're referring business to you. So that's what
Mm.
apostles. They're not over there saying, "Man, we're not doing any business with that guy, man. They don't, they mistreat their people, whatever." So I kind of the functional org chart. Let's get the right people, and then let's synchronize the departments. Then once we synchronize the departments, we figure out what the goals are. What are the measurables? As you said earlier, the data
Mm-hmm.
we need to keep making these decisions. And I tell leaders every 90 days, if we didn't meet a metric, we need to ask why. And I talk about this in the book. Ask why, because sometimes I see people, they came from a job, now they're in a new job, and the metric's not really relevant in where the strategy this company's going, but they're so used to measuring it, right?
Mm.
So we need to look at what we're measuring. If we're collecting data that's not relative to where we want to take the strategy, let's kill it. Let's quit wasting the time, the energy, and the money to collect it. And what is the real data we need? And I think if we have that kind of communication and open communication and accountability, it helps the company as they're making that scaling. Because as you're trying to scale, there's friction. So
Mm-hmm.
you've got to have open communication and good accountability to relieve some of that friction.
Yeah, absolutely. You said some amazing, great things. And the first thing I want to point out is for corporations to cross communicate on processes and things like that, not so much in the detail, but the fact that one process affects another.
It does.
And, or it has to be a step by step, right? Process 2 cannot happen unless process 1 is done, and so on and so forth. So it's so important to know that about your company, that you can say, hey, this is what's missing. So
I'll give you a good example of that. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
no, you're good.
I had a leader one time tell me, he said, if it's a policy that affects nobody but your division, you can sign it. If it affects even just one person outside your division, it has to go to the chief of staff.
Mm-hmm.
And he's the one that can sign it. In other words, as a manager or director, you can't sign it if it affects anybody outside your department.
Great to know. Great to know. Awesome stuff. And another thing you said was oh my God, you said so many great things, and like all my mind is like pulling out everything. So it's like flashing, right? Don't you hate when that happens when you're trying to get a thought? So in all of that, and being able to go into these companies and really show them, oh, this is what I wanted to say. All that data is really the story that's happening. And to go back and reflect, like you said, every 90 days, every quarter, once a month, however, quick your business is running. Some have to be more frequent, some a little bit more on that measurement. But to be able to look at the data and tell the story and then reflect and ask why things are working and not working out of all of that, what I've also loved that you said is when things aren't really getting you to that next level, we have to learn how to cut that part out. How do you help your clients when they're really attached to a process or a development or something that is really not serving them, but it's just something that they're comfortable with, they're used to? How do you help them kind of detach from that?
I like to use what's called objective evidence. So, that's an ISO term, but it's relative to dealing with people. You have to show them why what they're doing does not work. So, an example of this is maybe the owner wants to double the size of the company in 2 years. And you ask the question, okay, what is the average size transaction you have for the company? So it's a basic math problem. If the numbers don't align on the number of transactions you need based on the number of people you've got to get to your goal, then we got to either start talking about how we're going to add people, how we're going to change the process, or how to get to this goal. Because the goal again has to be smart, right? It's got to be realistic and achievable and timely. So if you don't lay out a realistic budgeting goal or a realistic sales goal that we can reverse engineer on how we're going to get there, you can't just look at the sales team and say, okay, we want you to grow 20%. Okay, boss, how? Where? Because we can go out and sell more product, but again, there's a ripple effect. And I have a whole chapter dedicated to the quadrants on how you break your sales apart and how, as a manager, you would break that piece down. It's current customer, current capability. Which customers can just buy more? Second quadrant is current customer, new capability. Can we add scope to what we're currently doing for that customer? Third quadrant is new customer, existing capability. We're doing something really good over here. We're making a living, but we want to grow the company, so we need to find new customers with what we're currently doing. And then the last one's quadrant 4. I call it my home run quadrant. We're going to go to a new customer and we're going to try something new. And so basically we're out there fishing and hopefully this catches, or we're going to get some traction going. And sometimes owners or leaders call that, it's a strategic buy-in, or it's a socialization of the company. You're just trying to get your name into the conversation. And it's we know we probably won't win the first time, or we know we may not win the first 2 or 3 times, but we become part of the conversation because they know who we are. And now in the future, we're part of the discussion, or people are talking about us to help solve a problem.
Wow.
Loss leader.
I can't wait.
Loss leader was the word I was looking for.
Gotcha. I can't wait to see that conjure and kind of how it lays out, because it's a great visual to be able to kind of understand the new clients, existing, retention, like all of that is mixed in there, right? How do you scale and grow, but knowing what concepts to plug in together in order to get you that storyline that you're looking for, and how you can scale or grow those 20%. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you so much for your knowledge in this space, and just for coming out with a simple way to just really look at things from a different perspective and take action on it. Tell us again the name of your book, where we can locate it at. And we do have the link, so we can drop that for you in the chats, in the show notes. So yeah.
Absolutely. So it's called the R Factor. The R stands for relationship management. So it's the R Factor by Brian L. Kent. And it's on Amazon. We currently have Softback and Kindle already out. 2 weeks ago or last weekend, I sat in the sound studio for 3 days. So we will have Audible out in the next couple of weeks. And so therefore, if you want to listen and read, you'll be able to do both. But anyway, but again, it's on Amazon, the R Factor, and look forward to if you got any questions. And then at the website, brianlkent.com, you can send us questions. You can send us notes. We have a drop down there if you're looking for me to come speak, or you want me to come coach, or if you're looking for investing, or if you're looking for consulting. So you to check it out. We'd love to have you and love to have more partners. And thank you, Nikki, for today.
Oh, absolutely. And Brian, what are you currently working on? We're heading into quarter 2. What is that looking like for you?
Well, like I said, I just finished the Audible, so that's coming out. I'm actually looking to do a few more talks. I was just in Orlando last week. Then I'm heading out to Phoenix the middle of April. Probably the big thing I'm working on, the federal budget showed up 6 months late, like seems to be normal these days. So that's created for some of my federal clients a bow wave of backed up frustration. So we're going to work on that. I just finished opening with the government or on behalf of the government in support of 5 hubs, incubators, if you want to call them, to help companies embrace the federal government. We're going to find out how many are going to be in this second wave. This next wave should be released here shortly, and that'll keep me busy opening probably another 5 or 10 locations, but we'll see how it goes. But and then, of course, I'll keep working with the clients I've got, and we'll pick up the new ones. We are going to set aside, and the follow-on to the R Factor, we're going to set aside an actual workbook so we can actually hold classes and work sessions. And then, of course, probably what I'm excited about for May is Kevin Harrington, one of the Sharks, and I are going to co-author a book that should be out, I think, early May. More to follow on that.
Great stuff. Great stuff. And how can people get a hold of you besides your website? Is there any LinkedIn, Facebook?
Yep. Absolutely. I have, as you would imagine, I got LinkedIn. It's Brian L. Kent. I have Facebook. I have X. I have Instagram. And so any of those 4 social medias, if you go to the website, you can click on the medias. It'll take you right to it. We engage pretty heavily in all 4 social medias pretty regularly. The team and I do. But the key is to just keep putting out good information and talking about success, providing that guiding light for people that want to learn to scale.
Awesome. And the last thing I want you to leave us with is that R in the R Factor, and that's relationships. How important was that for you to get that title one and then to put it together and make it what it is?
Well, I've always felt that the relationship people is critical. People talk about their people and their process. Their product and their process, and you don't hear them talk about their people. But if you look at a venture capitalist or a company that buys another company and they come in and they start cutting people, all of a sudden a division that might be $3 or $4 million, you cut the wrong person in that office, and that whole office might lose 70 or 80% of work, because work will follow people because people like working together. So if a manager leaves and goes to another company, he might take that whole book of business with him within a year. So you have to understand the relationships in the company to make sure you don't make the wrong cuts.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your time. Thank you all for listening to another episode of Building a Leadership Mindset podcast. Have a great day and make it count.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And definitely reach out to Brian Kent.